Many Americans find themselves at an unprecedented moment. We feel isolated, our world is marked by divisions, and we're not sure how to engage neighbors across differences.
We know our communities thrive when they are places of belonging for all. It's time to rebuild the we, a bigger sense of we than what we see around us today.
That's why we created Reimagining Us. I'm Nicole Argo, the founder and executive director at the Together Up Institute.
And I'm Scott Hutchison, the executive director of E Pluribus Unum. On Reimagining Us, we'll be talking to behavioral scientists, change makers, and educators to understand why we're divided, to hear true stories of people bridging divides and finding common ground.
Reimagining Us is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more at nextchapterpodcast.com/reimaginingus and togetherup.org/reimaginingus.
From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. One topic we often explore on Blue Sky is how people respond to some of life's toughest setbacks, oftentimes finding a way to turn their pain into their passion and purpose. Our guests today have managed to do just that. As you'll soon hear, Richard Strauss got the idea for the program later named Spirit Series after experiencing the loss of his spouse and trying to help his daughter through her grief and her many challenging questions that came with it. Richard later remarried, and now he and his wife Leslie are national co-directors of this remarkable organization. Richard Strauss was a writer for stage and screen going back to 1979, authoring historical fiction and biographies for Fox, MGM, Paramount, Columbia, Showtime, and a host of independent film companies. He's a graduate of Stanford University, co-founder of Blue Bear School of American Music, and he ran the Junior Great Books program at Westwood Charter School from 1997 to 2000, before founding Spirit Series in 2001. Leslie Strauss spent more than 20 years as a museum and arts education administrator before becoming co-director of Spirit Series in 2009. At the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art from 1985 to 2001, she was responsible for community and donor relations and special events fundraising. From 2001 to 2007, she served as Director of Alumni Affairs and Director of Special Programs at Art Center College of Design. Leslie has sat on a number of arts and education-related boards and is a certified professional coach, specializing in leadership and team-building skills for not-for-profit organizations. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Richard and Leslie Strauss as much as I did. Leslie and Richard Strauss, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you on. I'm familiar with your work, but a lot of our listeners won't be. So I'd like to start at the beginning and sort of when, why, and how did you create Spirit Series?
Wow. When my daughter was 10, her mom died, and she started asking some of the biggest questions in life, as you can imagine. Why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? Does anything make sense in life?
Yep.
And I looked around, and it's still emotional after 25 years. And there really wasn't anything in her life to address these existential issues. And slowly it dawned on me that that was my work to do. And I was a screenwriter at the time, so I understood story.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that great stories of heroes from the past could inspire my daughter and maybe other kids as well.
Amazing. And were you studied in those great stories of the past? Because you could have, when we're going to talk about your curriculum, you could have written about Jackie Robinson and, know, current events or George Washington or whatever, but you chose to go deep. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from the principal at her elementary school who had lost her mom when she was 8.
Oh, wow.
And she was the first educator I ever spoke to about the program, the possible program, because it wasn't anything at that point.
Right.
And she said, this could work, but you have to be sure to connect it to the things teachers need, which are state standards or career and college ready standards, whatever. If you meet the needs of teachers, you can also meet your own needs or your own objectives. So I went into the California state standards and realized that every 6th grader, for instance, in California has to study the story of Socrates or the story of Gautama Buddha. And I thought, well, why don't I check those out? Of course, I had a passing knowledge of all of them.
Sure.
But I guess the storytelling skills were about how to engage kids, tell a great story. And I had a nose for that. And, and I could write. And so I approached the principal of her middle school right before she entered. My daughter's name is Molly, or our daughter now. And the principal said, well, I'll let you talk to the 6th grade humanities teachers. I did, and 2 raised their hand. And then, a few months later, and when I said, I have one condition, my daughter has to be in one of those classes. And that came to pass. And 120 students experienced the life of the young prince who would become Buddha, a play we still call Buddha Walks, because it's the renunciation story in Buddhism. A prince who has everything you could possibly imagine decides to leave it all behind and step into the mystery, become a homeless person in search of a cure for suffering. And it's an extraordinary story. And probably among the stories that we've done most frequently with students, probably 20,000 kids have done that play.
So how do you break into schools? What is it that you're offering? So I can see how the story of your daughter was the motivating force, but now you're trying to get through these hurdles and bureaucracies and walls of schools. What is it that you're offering that makes a school finally say, you know what, this would be great for us, and let's give it a try?
Right.
Yeah, well, in all the years that we've been doing this, we've never advertised. It's truly word of mouth. So teachers talk to other teachers, principals talk to other principals, parents who've had 6th graders who have elementary school kids, they bring it to their schools. So that's I would say that's the primary way that we.
And the reason, you're right, Bill, that I had to do a version of the same thing that the young prince did in my humble way, which was to walk away from everything that I knew and step into the mystery myself, because I'd never been a teacher. I didn't understand public education, and certainly had never run a nonprofit organization or anything like that. So, but I would say that what really sells this is, just as Leslie said, the experience that school communities have when their students go through this rite of passage. And, so it's just grown very organically. And because we've connected it to the curricular needs of the teachers, there are always 2 stumbling blocks, time and money, right? So how do we find the time? Well, you can find the time because you have to spend 3 weeks anyway studying classical Greece. So why not do it this way instead of reading a little sidebar about Socrates Or, in 7th grade, world civilization, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, or the conquest of Mexico. So Galileo is a perfect fit for the scientific revolution. And
right.
And the encounter, as it's called, the conquest of Mexico, is something that all 7th grade history students have to study in California.
I love a good origin story, and Spirit series has a remarkable one. Faced with grief and unable to answer his daughter's profound questions following the loss of her mother, Richard Strauss leaned on his experience as a writer and decided to put these skills to a different use. Later joined by Leslie, these two now oversee a movement that uses timeless stories about character and virtues to create unique learning experiences for young people on the cusp of transitioning to adulthood. Instead of creating new contemporary stories, Spirit Series reaches back to history. I'm reminded here of my blue sky conversation with Neil Ford, whose father told him to read old books, since human nature doesn't change over the centuries. And what a great piece of perhaps synchronicity when Richard finds that there's a teacher in his daughter's elementary school who had similar experiences with grief and offered to support Richard in launching this venture. Today, he and Leslie are breaking through with school systems and expanding through positive word of mouth in ways they probably could not have imagined when this all began 25 years ago. Now, back to our conversation. Let's take Galileo as an example. School says, okay, Spirit Series, you guys are great. We're going to give this a try. Walk us through how that looks. What is the program? What do you do once you've gotten the green light from a school and they give you a time slot? Paint a picture for us. What is this? How does this work?
Okay, so the first thing that we do, so we don't determine the play, the teachers do,
okay.
right? And
okay.
obviously teachers have to buy in, right? So the teacher engagement makes a very big difference. And so we'll meet with the teaching staff. They'll pick the whatever play it is that they're going to do. So you mentioned Galileo's Crime. So
sure.
It was written as a 7th grade play. As it turns out, we do a huge amount of it in 5th grade
as well.
Well, yes.
Interesting.
So, but we will meet with the teachers. We plan the schedule. We are a three-week residency, and unlike many organizations, we don't come once a week. It's an intensive program where we'll meet with each class for an hour a day, every day for 3 weeks. We launch with everybody that's participating. So, for example, we were just in a middle school where we were working with 4 classes. All 4 classes meet together in the auditorium for an hour, and we do a launch assembly where we have a historical presentation and discussion. Wow. And then we do a 3-person live performance of the play that they will be doing.
Let me pause you for a second. So why do we do that? Because the program is really foundationed on the concept of safe passage to adulthood. So the students see 3 adults performing this 1-act play as a staged reading on book. They have their scripts in their hand, but we're in costume and lots of blocking and all of that. 3 weeks later, they're on the same stage with a script in their hand, in costume, performing the same play. So they start as children or, pre-adults, adolescents, whatever. This is the concept. And then they go through this intensive experience where they study, co-write, stage, and perform these plays. And on the other end, they've climbed this mountain and they have been initiated into young adulthood. That's the concept. And the last piece about that, I only made one really important decision, which is what allowed me to do this, because I didn't want to write for children and I didn't know how to write for children particularly, although I loved my daughter. So I chose to write for adults. And so these plays are really very demanding even for adults. I mean, Greek philosophy, for instance.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell us how there's so many clever, I think, parts of your model. Tell us how the casting works, because you can imagine you walk into the class and there's the outgoing, ambitious, theater kid. Tell us how these parts get assigned.
So the way we do the casting is it is by lottery, but students opt in. So, for example, in Galileo's Crime, when we performed that play, Galileo was wearing a hat. We bring that into the classroom on the first day, or perhaps for Socrates, it's a Greek urn or a singing bowl for Buddha, whatever it is. There's a sacred object. Students put their names on a piece of paper. If they want to play Galileo or the Pope or whatever, they put their name in the hat. And the classroom teacher picks those names out, and it goes one by one until the roles are cast. So there's a certain kind of magic to it, and everybody who is interested puts their name in, but it's not determined by how students' ability on day one or an audition. And what we see very often is that the last person the teacher wants, perhaps it's the person with learning issues or discipline issues or whatever it is, classroom attendance issues, they get a big role, and it's their opportunity to reinvent themselves. And one of the things that we see over and over again is that teachers get to see their students in a new way.
Yep.
And when our teaching artists come in, we come in with no history. So our expectation for every student is very, very high. And students will rise to meet those expectations.
Right. Yeah.
And if I could, I wanted to get back to day one, because we start the unit with a key question. So that conversation that we have at the beginning poses, before we start talking about history and Galileo or whatever it is, we ask the students a question about themselves. And then we discuss that briefly, but then we let that bother them. So for example, if we're doing Galileo's Crime, we ask the students, what do you believe in? And what are you willing to do for that belief?
Right.
And then they spend 3 weeks.
And they try to answer right in the beginning, and we say, we don't want to hear that now.
No shortage of answers to that one.
Or with Buddha, what do you want when you grow up in life? And then they spend 3 weeks with a prince of India who has everything you could possibly imagine, who gives it up.
Right.
So we like to confound and, get the wheels turning in these young people.
It's a Socratic technique, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're challenging them. You're not, like you said, you didn't write down to them. You didn't kidify this, if you will.
Yeah. Right.
It's and I imagine they sit up a little straighter in their seats when you start talking to them that way. And
yes.
Is that fair?
And things get quiet in the very best sense of the term when we walk in. Once they get the thing is that, and this connects to the developmental, and I don't think either Leslie or I take a lot of credit for any of this. It just sort of emerged. But it turns out that this work is developmentally really profound, which is to say that we work with students when they become metacognitive, when they're able to think about their thinking, when the horizon line of their life expands greatly. I mean, think about being 10 years old yourself. It's not about your family or your neighborhood anymore. It starts to be about the whole world. And there's brain science that supports the privileged age of initiation, which is to say 9 to 15 years old. Is a very special time in the development of human beings, and a time when, if you create the right conditions, young people can begin to identify with something greater than themselves, which is critical. And in fact, that's one definition of spirit or spirituality, which is, identification with something greater than oneself. And so the community that puts, and this is also true of Spirit Corps, our 7th through 10th grade curriculum as well. these classes do this together. It's a community experience for them. And, and they experience firsthand the profound power of collective action, and that has to do with the way the chorus we create for the plays, et cetera, and we can get into that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not only do they rise or fall as a classroom, and every single student participates in it, but typically we'll work with across a whole grade, and they see each other perform. So what happens is, beyond the classroom, it impacts the school culture. And one of the things that we see is classes are very supportive of each other as well.
Yeah, and they're watching as experts. They have the subjective experience of performing it, and then the objective experience of watching something that they know every single word of. If you go out to the yard in a middle school or something like that when Spirit Series is going on, you'll hear kids throwing the lines back to one another. Although they don't have to memorize the plays, they do. They memorize portions of it.
Before we get back to this episode with Richard and Leslie Strauss, here's a reminder about one of our promotional partners. And I'll say in advance, this spot was not planned specifically for this episode or for our married guest today. I promise. It's a terrific podcast series called Money for Couples. Hosted by Ramit Sethi, this show aims to help couples create a shared financial vision with clear steps for saving, spending, and living their best lives together. Each week, Money for Couples brings real, actionable advice with stories from real couples who face the same challenges you might be facing. For example, one episode you might want to check out is called We Save for Retirement but Have No Money to Spend Now. Money for Couples is available wherever you get your podcasts, so check it out and start building what Ramit Sethi calls your rich life today. It seems there are several reasons why the Spirit Series model is so effective. For one, they challenge the students who participate. These plays are written for adults and require a lot of thought and preparation to understand and perform them. The courses are intensive, 3 weeks for an hour a day, and every student participates. Because of this full involvement, an added sense of community is created. And I love the idea of teachers seeing their students in a different light. That's a gift for everyone involved. You mentioned teachers see the kids in a different light. You come in with staff, you come in with people to lead this. What are the classroom teachers doing when this happens? Are they in the back observing? Are they grading papers and looking up every once in a while? How involved are the actual teachers?
Well, as you said, we have a very well-trained staff, most of whom have a theater background, that are in the front of the room delivering the curriculum. But we do ask the teachers to participate, engage in the conversation, to support their students as they're learning. Every student has a script, so we often ask the teachers to make sure that students are highlighting their lines and following along. That's all part of it. But within that script, the students are going to be contributing either original poetry or original writing, and that's an area where teachers can get involved. And they create cues together, tableau, that they create as a team. So we very often, it amplifies the story. So for example, if the word is, oh, listen, the kids might decide to put, their hand up to their ear and so on. And teachers can get engaged in getting their kids to
run
work
the
together
cues.
and run the cues. And so there are all kinds of ways to pull teachers in. And it's interesting. I'm surprised how many teachers have had some theater experience, and it makes sense.
Oh, really?
When you think about it.
They're on stage every day.
Right.
Yes, they are. And, this is a great segue to the new era in our organization, which is, and you may or may not know about that. I think you probably do. So we're empowering classroom teachers now we've developed a way of doing both our 4th through 7th grade Spirit Series curriculum, the Legacy program, and the 7th through 10th grade curriculum, Spirit Core, which is a video self-discovery storytelling program built on the values of these inspirational stories. We've created a curriculum where the classroom teacher can self-implement these programs, so that we're not limited to having staff boots on the ground in any of these places. And it's the Spirit Core program is well along in that way, and the Spirit Series program, the beta tests that we've done, the pilots that we've done, have been extraordinarily successful. So we're excited because we get to memorialize this curriculum that we've been 40,000 hours in the classroom, 65,000 kids. So we've learned how to do it.
Amazing.
We've
And what's exciting about it, well, there are a number of things that are exciting about it, but in the pilots that we've done, in every single situation, the students report that they feel that the leaders that they are seeing on video, they feel as though, our leaders, they feel as though those people are in the classroom with them. They have a sense that they know them, and it's engaging and serious fun in a way. And also the teachers report that it allows them to have much deeper conversations with their students. It sets them up to ask big questions and delve into the important issues that students are facing.
And ups their game, because, and so, we've created a extensive set of videos, step by step, that drop the class off, the teacher and the students off in a place each hour where they can complete the work of the day, whether it's a table read or writing the poetry or doing craft, there's an art component of this, or casting or whatever. And, so it's also a way of sharing a kind of professional development piece for us, sharing what we've learned about how to engage, how to stimulate conversations about values and existential big questions and all of that. And we've learned how to do it, and we're able to share it with teachers. And so far, knock wood, it's working really better than we had anticipated.
One of the things that our curriculum, I think, asks of anybody that's leading it is a certain kind of vulnerability. Because when you ask somebody else to open up and to dig deep, you've got to do that yourself. You've got to set the example.
Sure. Is it fair to say Spirit Core really came out of the pandemic? And the reason I ask is here at the Optimism Institute, we're always looking for these silver linings. And as awful as the pandemic was, and let's hope it's truly moving into the past tense, it did spur incredible creativity and nimbleness from organizations like your own. Could you talk about that? So you've got this in-school program, and then all of a sudden the schools are closed.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's an existential crisis for an organization like yours.
It definitely was. And I'll just say a little, then Leslie probably has lots more to add. But Spirit Core was not the first thing that came out of the pandemic. First, we were able to translate our drama-based program for the younger kids into something we could present on Zoom. And we realized, and each student in their own siloed Zoom area, and we found a way of replicating costumes and sets by putting a theatrical background background on all of the students, Zoom squares, and
Great.
all the kids wear black. And then we realized we were essentially making films because, somebody's internet would drop out. And then, we'd have to stop and then start again.
And then reorganize the squares to match. It was challenging.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But exciting. And of course, at that time, students were just thrilled to be doing something together.
Yeah. Right.
And so there was a lot of tolerance fortunately, for this. But then at the end of it, everybody got a video that they could keep of this experience.
Right. So, and then, at the same time, we as a staff started exploring stories built on the virtues we celebrate in the one act plays. So each of the plays has a set of journal entries, 4 journal entries at the end. So for Song of Sitting Bull, for instance, it's the 4 Lakota virtues: courage, generosity, fortitude, and wisdom. Or for Socrates, the 4 pillars of Greek philosophy, or Buddha walks 4 steps on the Eightfold Path. So we identified 3 of these attributes to focus on first, which were courage, conscience, and compassion, happened to come from those 3 of the plays. And we started telling our own stories, finding, our story of conscience or compassion, and recording them as 3 to 4 minute videos, working with partners and, to help us edit and direct us during the recordings. And we loved it. And then friends started doing it as well. And then we realized, this would be a wonderful next step for students who had already studied Socrates. Then, in other words, you study the core foundational story, and then you've earned the right to tell your own version of conscience, let's say, for Socrates. Right. And we've now done this with probably, I don't know, between 5,000 and 10,000 kids. I'm not sure.
So great.
Exactly. Yeah. And
amazing.
And one of the keys to it also is the fact that they have a peer that they work with in their classroom, but then we have a whole team of volunteer coaches, adults who work with individual students. On Google Sheet, they never actually meet the student, but they give feedback at critical points in time. And so it's way more feedback than any teacher would ever be able to give their students.
Yeah, it's an hour of personalized feedback from a very skilled adult professional.
So great.
Yeah.
So back to Spirit's series, you mentioned that word of mouth is really how you grow, and it's not about marketing. At the same time, I imagine with school boards, state and local, there better be some results here. They're coming in for 3 weeks, and the kids, for all we know, they're goofing off for an hour a day. And my first reaction would be, I would think, they say sometimes if you really want to learn a subject, you teach it. I think if you really want to learn a subject too, if you literally embody it and act it out, a story like you're doing, I assume there's some evidence in that they're actually learning these subjects far better than if they'd read 2 pages in a book. Well, what other results? I'm sure you have, and I've seen some of your results. You'd have to have that to keep going, because if this were a waste of time, you would have been long gone a while ago. So can you walk us through some of those results that you've seen?
Well, yes. So we started with anecdotal results. So, we would survey teachers, and they would say the same thing over and over again. And, when you get, 500 pieces of feedback that all kind of conform to one another, that qualitative assessment becomes quantitative.
Sure.
So, you're starting to see data there in the form of, and then, the program was evaluated by the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And they thought it was quite extraordinary and actually unique. And again, when we say all of this, we want to be sure for you to understand that, this kind of dropped in our laps And we're not sure where it came from. But I think where it came from most of all is being passionate about parenting and, knowing how to, I, for one, knew how to relate to my daughter in a very, I was an expert at that.
Yeah,
and so
right.
I kept her in mind in every decision that I would make or was made about how to launch the curriculum. And so, but I'm as surprised, and I think Leslie is as well, by the way in which it conforms with developmental theory and the best theories of pedagogy and all of that. Yeah. None of which I knew in a other than in an intuitive way. So after the Harvard study, we knew we needed data, but we kept thinking, well, we've got to hire a data firm to do this. And I can't even remember who we were speaking with, but somebody with a lot of expertise in education, a principal, a superintendent, somebody. And they said, that's nonsense. Do your own self-assessment. And so with help from some social scientists, we put together a quantitative assessment and started administering it. And we did a 3-year study from which got terminated because of the pandemic. So 2016 through the 2016-2017 year through the 2019 year. And the results were completely in line with our anecdotal experience of having delivered the program. And they were extraordinary, which, we asked the teachers to assess their classes before they did the curriculum and then immediately after. And we found across the 9 program goals we had that the teacher assessment of their classes increased by an average of about 25-26%. And we also asked the students, it's really interesting. The lowest score the students gave was on presentation skills because they didn't
remember how nervous they were.
That's right.
Oh, sure.
But it was the highest score for the teachers, right? Because they were able to watch it. But, so, and the goals were authentic literacy, higher order thinking, self-reflection, teamwork, presentation skills, character, positive core values, and self-efficacy, which is the most important of all of them as far as we're concerned. And
I've gone through some of the research too, even things like absenteeism dropping during the time that you're there.
That's true.
I mean, you think about the challenges that schools had, especially probably since the pandemic, certainly during the pandemic, kids not showing up on the Zoom calls, but absenteeism is chronic in a lot of the schools you work in, I'm sure.
And it's not always the fault of the student. I mean, very often the parents are having difficulty getting their kids to school and so on. And we've had many situations where somebody with a lead role is a chronically absent student. And they speak to their parent and say, "This is important to me.
Right.
I need to get to it."
And they feel accountable to their peers, I bet.
Exactly.
They feel like I'm going to let the whole class down.
Yeah.
Correct.
I'm not in school tomorrow.
Right. And when you think about what they're doing, they are presenting themselves to their entire world, to their classmates, to their school community, their teachers, the administrators, to their parents. I mean, that's pretty much, most of who counts for these young people. And for the older kids, they're putting themselves on video, which anybody who's ever done that knows that is a rite of passage.
Yeah.
The results achieved by Spirit Series are pretty amazing. I particularly love the idea that they've been able to help with absenteeism, with students wanting to be sure that they make it to class, to not let their classmates turn castmates down. And it's moving to hear how Richard continued to keep his daughter in mind as he developed and innovated within his program. And once again with Spirit Series, we see an organization that was dealt a big blow by COVID, yet managed to remain hopeful and optimistic, innovating their way through the pandemic to the other side. Now, back to our final segment with Leslie and Richard Strauss. One of the reasons I admire, one of the many reasons I admire the work you do is, and people who listen to this podcast know I'm a big history buff, and it's one of the reasons I embrace optimism, because I think it's important to know how far we've come as a species and as a culture. And
Right.
and you are teaching these, every kid, every generation thinks everything's unique to them. This has never happened before. I've never had to deal with these issues before.
Right.
And of course, Socrates didn't deal with social media, but the core values, I would hope and would think that these kids walk away with, oh my gosh, this has been going on forever. And it helps put their challenges in context and helps give them the sort of agency to say, okay, these guys dealt with this 1,000 years ago. I can handle this. Is that part of it?
Yeah, you should be selling the program. That's exactly.
In the play Seeking Socrates, which is done in 6th grade, and I'm sure you probably remember what it was like to be, a 6th grader and the social pressure and so on. And we didn't have to deal with likes and clicks and all of that stuff. But there's a character in Seeking Socrates whose ego is rather strong. And his name gets chanted, and he comes back to his teacher, Socrates. They were chanting my name. So we have this beautiful opportunity to talk to students about, does popularity feed the soul, which is a line directly out of that play. And it hits home.
Yeah. And that goes back to the quiet, which is when you're at ground zero. And I mean that with, bombs are dropped at ground zero too, but when you're right at the epicenter of what's troubling them, and they don't even know it's troubling them until you surface it. Yeah, it's one of the most extraordinary feelings I've ever had as a human, which is that you have pin drop attention because they're deeply troubled. I mean, our kids haven't changed. The times have changed, the world has changed, but young people need what they've always needed, what we needed when we were kids. Purpose and meaning, challenge, wonder, self-expression, belonging, and safe passage to adulthood. How do I get there? I see all these adults, take me there, help me get there, And we're really, unfortunately, not doing a very good job with that. And so it's left up to TikTok and Instagram to initiate these young people into adulthood. And, it's the Wild West. I mean, what values do they really need to survive? And every society, probably since the dawn of time, has ensured that those values get passed along because it's an existential issue for them. Yeah.
So I am sure there are people listening to this thinking, this is amazing. I've never heard of this before. It is not in my kid's school. What can they do? I'm sure you have capacity constraints, but you would welcome interest. What can somebody listening to this do to either get you in their school, maybe get involved themselves as a facilitator, a teacher? Help us understand how you can grow this with this audience.
Well, the first thing they can and should do would be to visit us at spiritseries.org and get a really good overview of what we do. There are some fantastic videos, both about the individual programs that we do and also a lot of our Spirit Core stories about the values are on there. And there's a way to contact us, and we can get back to individuals to talk about whether they want something at their school, would like to do Spirit Core, would like to volunteer as a story coach, perhaps.
Yeah, or donate.
Or donate, right, or donate. Because
being transparent, our biggest constraint is resourcing, like any nonprofit,
Sure.
So, and increasingly we're developing a really robust team of volunteers to do the Spirit Corps program, and that it's very gratifying. And the only precondition is you have to tell your own story first, right? So whatever attribute. So once you've made the rite of passage, then and this is true for our partner teachers as well.
Sure.
We ask them to do their story of whatever attribute they've settled on first. And then then they become experts at the 5-step self-discovery and writing process because they've gone through it themselves. And also, they're modeling their vulnerability, in front of the class when they show their story. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So spiritseries.org for more information and a donate now button, I'm sure. And I want to thank you both, not just for your time today to be on this show, but for what you have created. It's a remarkable thing. And there are many different ways you could spend your time and talent and your own personal resources. And I just thank you for applying it in this way. And I know that everybody listening to this is going to be really uplifted by what you've had to say today. So thank you for everything.
Thank
you, Bill. Really. Thanks much.
Appreciate it. With Spirit Series, Leslie and Richard have hit on something that's important for us to remember. The times have certainly changed, but kids haven't. And learning and acting out these timeless stories can help today's school children develop confidence and learn important, age-old lessons about values and virtues. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Spirit Series National Co-Directors Leslie and Richard Strauss. Before you go, we'd appreciate a rating or review, and hope you'll subscribe to this podcast and follow the Optimism Institute on social media. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the team at Sound On Studios. You can learn more about their work at soundonstudios.com. All graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.